Good morning. It's Thursday, February 20th. Senate Agriculture in Business today. It's cold morning out there in the state of Vermont. So we are going to spend some of part of our morning getting some equine industry updates. We have some folks here with us today on Zoom. And who would like to lead off the discussion?
I think that would be me. Thank you, Senator Ingalls. I'm Heidi Krantz, and I'm a former president of the Vermont Horse Council and the current chair of the Equine Industry Committee. And we really appreciate the quickness with which you turned around and got us in. So thank you very much.
We have Linda to thank for that. So
Yeah.
we thank her every day. But thank
Yes.
you, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Great. Well, thank you. So we're the Vermont Horse Council is the only statewide equine organization in Vermont that represents the entire equine industry. And our mission is promoting a thriving equine community in Vermont. We are a totally volunteer, member-supported organization, and the Economic Industry Committee oversees the legislative work of the council, and we work closely with our partners at the Vermont Farm Bureau. As you can all imagine, with being on the Ag Committee, the last 2 years have been challenging for equine farm operators, just as it has been for others who make their living from the land. One additional challenge that's faced by many equine farmers is that they do not benefit. They do not all benefit from inclusion in the current use or eligibility for other agricultural support programs because their farms do not consistently meet the definition of agriculture. To give you a little bit of background, equine businesses are essentially a value-added agricultural entity. The horses are the raw material for the product or service, and it is the management and care of the horses that is the agricultural piece. The owner of the business is a farmer whose business model must include income from sources dependent on horses, including sales, boarding, instruction, and other forms of tourism or recreational services. But that income is only possible if the horses, the raw product, is healthy, sound, and available for use. So while the product is recreational, the equine operations that provide those services that manage and care for the horses necessary for these activities is the same as it is for all other livestock producers. The timeline for the return on the investment for a horse, however, is much longer than for most other livestock, as horses take a longer time to mature physically so that they can be used in a way that will produce some income, whether it is that they're being sold or being used in other ways. And Mindy's going to talk about that a little bit more. Horses require an average of an acre per animal for pasture and adequate space for the daily movement required for their health. We shared with you a brief that we recently received from the Center for Rural Studies that's from the most recent USDA agricultural census. And in that, it states that 48% of equine operations in Vermont exist on properties up to 49 acres. And if you go up to include 71% of equine operations, they manage up to 180 acres. This is for pasture and hayland primarily. Those that don't own enough land must purchase hay from other farmers or lease land. The equine industry maintains and depends on the working agricultural lands and scenic landscape that's so important to Vermont's overall economy. Our current legislative efforts focus on inconsistencies in the treatment of equine farm operations. These inconsistencies exclude some equine farm operations and buildings that were included when the same properties were used for dairy. We're asking for inclusion of equine farm operations that are making more than 50% of their income from the equines in their care, and for those equine operations that are like other farmers, managing the land for the growth and health of their livestock. These equine farms support the goals of the current use program and the state to, quote, encourage and assist the maintenance of Vermont's productive agricultural and forest land, prevent the accelerated conversion of these lands to more intensive use, to achieve more equitable taxation for undeveloped lands, and to encourage and assist in the preservation and enhancement of Vermont's scenic natural resources. They are expected to meet the same required agricultural practices and other regulations, but because they are excluded from current use, they do not benefit from the same support to help them keep their acres of land open and productive. We're here today because we wanted your committee to be aware of our efforts and the progress we've made with the help of the Farm Bureau, the House Agricultural Committee, the Vermont Law and Graduate School, and staff of the Current Use Program and the Agency of Agriculture. Mindy will now share with you some information about her experience as an equine farmer in Vermont and her observations about the obstacles limiting their success as businesses and stewards of the land. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Heidi. My name is Mindy Hinsdale. I'm a 7th generation Vermonter. I grew up in Charlotte, attended CVU, and graduated from UVM. I owned and operated Steeple Ridge Farm, a horse farm first in Ferrisburgh, then in Charlotte for 35 years. I sold the farm 8 years ago and am now a small business owner. I am a longtime member of Vermont Farm Bureau and am currently serving as the Chittenden County Vice President. I am also on the board of the Vermont Hunter Jumper Association, where I was president for many years, the Green Mountain Horse Association board, as well as an active member of the Vermont Horse Council, where I am on the Equine Industry Committee. After selling my beloved horse farm, you would think I would have retired from the horse industry, but to the contrary, I have remained very active in the Vermont horse community and have been an advocate for the horse industry for many years as a volunteer. I am very grateful to be able to speak with you today on behalf of the Vermont horse industry. Thank you, Senator Heffernan, for encouraging us to get onto your schedule. In the 35 years I owned and operated Steeple Ridge Farm, I was a full-time farmer making 60 to 100% of my income from working the horse farm. There were a few years when I supplemented my income with a part-time school teaching position. I'd like to share with you my background as a horse farmer. In the 35 years I was a horse farmer, I renovated 2 farms, one dairy and the other a replacement heifer and hay farm. The first farm I purchased and renovated was a rundown 200-acre dairy farm in Ferrisburgh. The dairy barn was repurposed to horse stalls, the milking parlor became the tack room, and we used the same manure removal system that was already in place. Along with boarding, lessons, camps, and horse shows, we also raised hay for our own needs and to sell to others. We made well over 50% of our income from the farm. But as soon as the cows walked out of the barn and the horses walked in, we were taxed at a higher rate as the buildings could no longer be included in current use. In 1996, my circumstances changed and I needed to downsize. The only way I could afford to purchase another farm was to do another farm renovation. I purchased a 32-acre heifer replacement and hay farm and moved Steeple Ridge Farm to Charlotte. Later, I purchased an adjoining 8-acre parcel for a total of 40 acres, a perfect size for my needs. It was the same situation. When the cows moved out and my horses moved in, I paid higher taxes than the farmer I purchased the farm from. I renovated the heifer barn to house 24 horses, then several years later added a 16-stall barn with an attached indoor arena. The farm became highly successful, so much so that I had several offers over the years from people who wanted to purchase it, but I had no intention of ever selling my precious farm. But as the years went by and taxes, insurance, and workers' compensation went up, it was becoming increasingly difficult to make a living from the farm. When I was approached in 2016 from someone who wanted to purchase my farm, sadly, I sold it. Both farms I renovated from cow farms to horse farms are still operating as horse farms today and keeping the precious land open. Both farms, whose barns were once occupied by cows and enrolled in the current use program, provided the farmers with the privilege of not paying property taxes on the barns. When I converted the barns for horses, even though I kept the farms enrolled in the current use program, all the barns were taxed. I'd like to talk about some of the reasons I feel horse farms and horse farmers have not been fully accepted into the current use program. One is perception. One thing that horse farmers face that other types of farmers do not is the stigma that all horse owners, therefore all horse farm owners, are wealthy. It is a fact that some horse owners are wealthy. I had some wealthy horse owners boarding their horses at my farm. But the reality is that most horse farm owners who are making their living with horses are not wealthy. They are hardworking farmers with the same ethics about animal and land husbandry and are doing it because they love farming as a way of life. Horse farms are keeping the land open with horses dotting the countryside, following the same best agricultural practices such as manure storage and removal, fertilizing schedules, field drainage, etc., as other Vermont farmers. We are not asking to help the hobby horse owner who has a couple horses in their backyard, or the wealthy doctor who has an indoor arena, but the horse farmer who makes at least 50% of their income from their working horse farm, using their land for pastures, paddocks, hay production, and exercising the horses. For the 35 years I owned Steeple Ridge Farm, I considered myself a true Vermont farmer and am very proud of my role in the Vermont farming industry. I'm proud of how I converted 2 cow farms into horse farms and that they continue to be successful horse farms, keeping the land open now and for years to come. I raised my 2 daughters and put them through college. Horse farming can do this for a family in Vermont, but in today's economy, those farming families need help. Please understand that I was not a wealthy person playing at horses. I was a struggling, hardworking farmer who made my living on my horse farm. Lack of understanding of what is involved in taking care of horses is another category I'd like to talk about. It has occurred to me that one of the reasons horse farms have been excluded from the full tax benefit current use offers, as well as sales tax exemptions on certain farm goods, is a misunderstanding and or a lack of knowledge about how horses are cared for. Horses are livestock that need to be cared for daily, fed 3 to 4 times a day, stalls and run-in sheds cleaned, horses turned out if live inside, hooves picked every day, and exercised 4 to 6 times a week, especially if in a training program. Turnout in the summer months can be tricky for some horses and ponies who cannot eat fresh green grass due to hormone issues, so need to be turned out in dry lot paddocks, much like cows who go out on cement pads to get fresh air and sunshine. Most horses can go out in larger fields full of lush green grass. Horse farms need enough turnout spaces so pastures can be rotated in order to limit worm infestation and to allow grass to regrow for rotational grazing. Horse farms need safe spaces to exercise the horses, give lessons, run events, and turn out horses on bad weather days. These spaces are outdoor and indoor riding arenas. And of course, we need barns to house and care for the horses. All of this infrastructure requires acreage, which is why many horse farms meet the 25-acre minimum and are often larger if hayfields are part of the farm. I have learned of several horse farms that have recently been contacted by the current use office identifying pieces of their property that may be ineligible for the current use program. Town listers are then asked to go inspect the property to see if there is any acreage that can be deemed ineligible for the current use program. I have been disheartened to learn that horse pasture space is being taken out, farm roads are being taken out, outdoor riding arenas are being taken out, and these parcels are being put back into acreage that gets the full development value placed on it, as if it was a standalone parcel you could sell to be developed. In some cases, it makes a farm not able to meet the 25-acre minimum anymore. These outdoor spaces are vitally important for the care of the horses. The farmers are not going to build a house in their horse pasture or outdoor riding ring. I don't understand why this is happening. All of my farm acreage, including the pastures, paddocks, farm road, and outdoor ring, minus the 2-acre homestead, was taxed at the current use rate. As I have shared, none of my buildings were allowed to be exempt from the property taxes, in the same way other farmers have this exemption. Buildings are taxed on square footage, and the square footage of barns that house horses, especially if in a repurposed dairy barn, are quite large. Now, breeding qualifies, but it doesn't work for horse farms. And I'll tell you why. The one category that allows horse farm buildings to be included in current use is horse breeding. I understand the argument that horse farms aren't producing food, but neither are flower farms or sheep farms that just produce wool. Allowing only horse breeding farms to be fully accepted in the current use program doesn't make sense. I understand that having a replacement heifer operation makes sense. The turnaround to cash flow for cow breeding operations is much quicker than for horse breeding operations. A dairy cow can be bred as early as 2 years old, then starts producing milk. The heifer replacement farm can sell calves to farmers who need them shortly after they are born. The earliest horses can be bred as 3 years old. Most are older. Then to make money from the breeding operation, the foals need to grow up and be trained. You shouldn't start riding a horse or pony until they are at least 3 years old. Many are still too immature to start at that age. Training is a long process, and a lot of money is put into the animal with feed, care, vet, and farrier bills, etc. So the turnaround to profit time is much longer and more complicated for horses. It makes more sense for horse farms to purchase young horses when they are 4 to 5 years old and then finish their training. My point is, a horse farmer cannot be exclusively in the breeding business and make at least 51% of their income from the breeding portion of their business. That business must teach lessons, board horses, do summer camps, etc. So making breeding the only requirement for horse farm buildings to be considered agricultural buildings and be treated the same as other agricultural businesses under the current use program isn't realistic. The definition used in the current use program needs to be expanded to include the raising of horses. In all the other Vermont definitions of agriculture, it is understood that raising horses includes boarding, training, and lessons, as they are an integral part of horse care and the financial success of the business. A successful business plan for a horse farm is much different than a successful business plan for a dairy farm or a heifer replacement farm. Equality of taxation. Buildings are taxed according to their square footage, and barns that house horses and used for training horses, especially if a repurposed dairy barn, are many square feet. How does Vermont handle unequal or often overtaxation of agricultural buildings? One of the problems is taxing on square footage, and many of these structures are being taxed at commercial rates. Indoor arenas and horse barns are a lot of square feet. A small indoor arena, 60 by 120, is 7,200 square feet. My indoor was 72 by 176, which is 12,672 square feet. The largest indoor arena I know of in Vermont is in New Haven, and it is 100 by 200 feet. You can do the math on that one. Many buildings, including equine buildings, are considered single-purpose structures. If you don't use an indoor arena for riding lessons, then what do you use it for? Storage? which isn't allowed in some towns and certainly not if the land is in current use or part of the Vermont Land Trust. Prior to 1978, ag buildings were considered business inventory and taxed. So legislator Bobby Starr came up with the idea that ag buildings were farm equipment inventory, so not to tax them. This was to encourage farming. Bobby Starr motto was, "Don't kill farmers with property taxes." The equine industry is now facing the same problems the dairy industry was facing back in the 70s. Horse farms are declining at a rapid rate. It would be nice if horse facilities weren't taxed for more than they are worth, but taxing on square footage tends to make that happen. And frankly, these buildings shouldn't be taxed at all. When I went to the town clerk's office to get a permit to build my indoor arena, I was told I didn't need a permit because it was for an agricultural building. I couldn't believe it. I asked for that decision to be in writing. Yet, as soon as the agricultural building was completed, it didn't qualify as an ag building for the current use program. I believe that horses are the last livestock animal in our state that can help keep significant tracts of land open, as well as keep the scenic viewscapes we cherish. Horses need large areas to graze and be turned out. Horses need large areas to be exercised, both indoors and outdoors. Horses need hay baled in square bales, either put up on the farm they live on or purchased from another local farmer. Horses are eating grain produced by local farmers. All of these needs support the purposes outlined for the current use program. So what is standing in the way of horse farms being treated equally with other types of farms to receive fair taxation through the current use program? The answer, the definition of agriculture used by current use. With the help of the Vermont Law and Graduate School, we have learned that there are at least 15 different definitions of equine agriculture for equines in our state statutes. What we have discovered is that people who run equine businesses earning at least 51% of their gross income from equine business activities are considered farmers on their properties and are considered farms in all but one definition: current use. All farmers in Vermont are required to meet the required agricultural practices. We are farmers when it comes to water quality issues, manure management, etc. We have sent the memorandum put out by the Vermont Law School to you to be filed with our testimony that has the results of their research on Vermont statutes relevant to equine businesses. The Vermont Law School summarizes their findings this way. Equine businesses may generally constitute farming in two ways. First, the raising, feeding, or management of equines constitutes farming under 10 VSA section 6001, etc. Second, the raising, feeding, or management of 4 or more equines the farmer owns or boards, including training, showing, and providing instruction and lessons in riding, training, and the management of equines, constitutes farming under 10 VSA section 6001. The Vermont Law School says exceptions are notable. Vermont current use statute 32 VSA sections 3750 to 3777 exclude many forms of equine businesses from the definitions of agricultural land, farmer, and farm buildings that do not satisfy certain conditions, thereby disqualifying those businesses from tax relief from current use. The current use program has been revised and tweaked several times since its inception in 1978. Farmers with less than 25 acres wanted to be included in the current use program. So there were provisions made for vegetable farmers and flower growers to be able to put smaller than 25-acre parcels into the current use program, as long as they could show they make at least $2,000 per year selling their vegetables or flowers. Simply changing the definition of agriculture in the current use statute as it relates to equines would allow horse farms the same tax relief. We are asking Vermont to accept the fact that horse farms are keeping the land open now and for the future, and are meeting the same required agricultural practices. Until Vermont sees horse farms in this way and treats them equitably in agriculture, letting them benefit from the same tax relief current use offers, as well as other agricultural programs, we predict we will continue to lose horse farms at a rapid rate. I feel we are at a tipping point in the horse industry in Vermont. We know people who are still wanting to purchase farms. Some are trying to hold on to the ones they have. Some have already gone out of business, while others have left the state to run their business elsewhere. We are trying to encourage horse farmers to hang on and hope we can help them by letting them know progress is being made. We have appealed to the House Agriculture Committee and have testimony you can find filed with them. We learned yesterday that legislator Greg Burt, along with others, has put forward a bill based on the testimony we have given. We urge you to take a serious look, fully including horses, including the income derived from caring for, training, and other value-added pursuits, to allow horse farms, horse farmers, and land used by horse businesses to be fully included in the current use program. Thank you. And I guess Heidi and I will now take questions if you have any.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So both of you did a great job. Thank you very much. Mindy, I'm especially grateful that you mentioned former Senator Bobby Starr. Unless he's listening, this is all supposed to be secret, but there'll be a ceremony today in what used to be the very small ag room. We're renaming it Bobby's Room. So if I surprise, I'm sorry, but my guess is he's probably en route, and as far as I know, he doesn't watch TV when he's driving.
Let's hope not.
Oh,
Yeah.
That's great. That's wonderful.
That's
Yeah.
wonderful.
The second piece, and you did refer to this a little bit when you talk about definitions. I'm going to guess there's at least a dozen definitions of farming in our statutes, maybe even more than that. And it does provide some confusion, I think, a lot of times. My question is, and I'm sure you have thought about this, if we were to expand the current use provision to allow you to take full advantage of the tax credit, it creates a hole, a revenue hole. And if this is to happen, we're going to have to come up with a way to fill that hole to some degree, or at least explain why we want to have the equine industry get full exemption. So is there a number that you've come up with that if we did this, it's foregone revenue. Let's be honest. It's revenue the state's getting now that they won't get, or it won't get. And that'll be an issue, I'm sure, for some folks.
Yes. So to that point, which is a great one, I have two things to say. One is time and time again, when a horse person purchases a dairy or heifer replacement farm or other farm where the buildings were already enrolled in current use, all of a sudden there's a tax bump when they then become taxed on the buildings. So for years, it's gone the other way in many cases. And then also we have reached out to Senator Hardy to see, and she's said she's willing to help us figure out the monetary piece. Evidently it was figured out in 2013 and we need to update that. Is that what you remember, Heidi?
Yes, yeah, there apparently through the joint fiscal committee,
yes,
that research had been done. But as we've seen from our own economic impact study that was completed in 2019, the industry is changing a lot. And so I'm sure that there's already been a change in the volume of equine businesses. So there are fewer and fewer of them. And the other way to look at it is that if those existing equine farms continue to drop at the rate that they are, the state's losing tax income from that already. So we by keeping those businesses here, we also have the side or tangential effect that where in many cases keeping young people in Vermont, because many of these farms are owned and run by younger people, they are helping to meet the goals that the state has set for protecting open land. If as those farmers close, many of them are going to be inclined to sell to whoever's going to buy them, often splitting those into smaller parcels and thereby changing the size of the property. So it's a complicated, as you all well know, it's a complicated equation that we're trying to get our hands around. And so we are hoping that we can find out about that information that was gathered in 2013 and use that as a baseline. I have shared with Linda, so it should be available to you, a few documents. One is the document that came from the Vermont Law and Graduate School with the definitions that they found. So that should be at your fingertips. We've also shared, we just recently had the Center for Rural Studies produce a brief from the USDA's most recent agricultural census that pulls out some data about equine businesses and the changes in those operations that was completed in 2022. So that's actually the most recent information we're aware of. So and that's a 1 or 2 page document. So I would encourage you to look at that because that looks at the number of horses, both on private ownership, but also on operations, and also the size of those properties.
Do you recall what the number of the House bill is that you referenced?
Yeah, I think, and I'll look this up while we're talking to be sure, but I think it was H073.
Okay.
Let me, I'll
273.
27. I'll look it up while you talk among yourselves.
Well, the argument, if it's an argument that you made regarding the diminishing number of horse farms and the resulting loss of revenue is a similar one that I've made on more than one occasion for the military retirement pension exemption for our income tax. As we lose veterans who are moving out and making folks out of state hesitate to move in, it's the same sort of argument. So I'm fully in support of, I'm sure, of that bill and letting the guys take full advantage of current use.
So it is H0273.
Okay.
I put it in the chat. I put a link in the chat.
Okay.
Well, good. Any more questions? We'll take a look at that bill and see what we can do on the Senate side of it. But I want to thank you both for coming in today, and thank you as well for being able to come in on short notice. It certainly helped our schedule very much. So and it also gave you folks a chance to be listened to, and we appreciate that. So
Yes, and
Thank you.
we're happy to help out in any way that we can going forward.
well, Senator Heffernan has offered to come and shovel out the horse stalls.
Great.
You got a little work for him. He'd be right there.
Nothing like firsthand experience.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, sometimes you gotta start at on the ground level.
That's right.
Thank you very much. Have a good
Thank you
day.
so much.
Yep, thank
You're
you.
very welcome. Have a good
Bye-bye.
day. Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
How are we doing? Great.
Jackie's here now, if you want to go ahead and hear, and then we can adjourn.
Yes, we can do that. Absolutely. Do you want to stay for the bill? I mean, is Michael coming in too?
No, she's just testifying now because this was when she could come in. But
Okay, then,
The big
okay,
crew
so,
one
so,
is tomorrow, so she's kind of the first witness.
okay, then let's continue on.
Adjourn, how exciting.
Yeah.
Good morning. I have another hat on today, I must admit. I think it's the only one left. The only one I have left. So for the record, my name is Jackie Folsom. I'm the president of the Vermont Farm Bureau today. And this is the only committee you'll see me in. So I'll take a breath and not worry about that. So I wanted to come in and talk about S60, which is the bill for the Farmer Emergency Relief Assistance. Farm Bureau was a member of the coalition that started working on this language back in the last summer and early fall. And we do have policy that we passed at Vermont Farm Bureau's annual meeting in November that does support the language and the concept. Having said that, when the bill came out, there were a couple things that I was a little uncomfortable with, and I did talk with Maddie from NOPA and also Amy Schellenberger, who is spearheading the lobbying on this. And they're aware that I'm coming in with my concerns and actually said these concerns have been raised, so perhaps this is nothing new to you. Reading through the bill, and I understand that this is in the findings, but it still made me cringe a little bit, is the fact that it specifically mentions small and medium scale farms. Vermont Farm Bureau is a big tent folk. We do not discriminate against size, and we would not support anything, regardless of the fact that we do support the idea, but we do not support.
The first question asked was that, and I think we got around that. And I don't know why the language was in there. Committee helped me out on that, but I don't know why that. I think that they had said they didn't want to exclude them, but they had thought that maybe they had more resources as a large farm.
I think they were
But they wouldn't exclude them.
They were talking about access to crop insurance, I think is what I was told, and that's fine.
And I think that we could safely, kind of, without harming the intent of the bill, I think we could safely remove that language in this committee. I would feel better so that there wasn't a advice nodding your head in the right direction. So I think we could probably safely, it was our first question.
Perfect. We're all in one thought line here. That's great. Well, and that was when I read it, and as I said, it's in the findings, so that doesn't go through anything, but it did kind of set the tone for me that, oh my, this is not going to work. So thank you for that. The second piece that we fought for in the coalition, but it made it into the House bill, but not into the Senate bill, was the inclusion of the forestry industry, because we also represent forestry, and they were not part of the ability to partake of the VGAP funding last year. We recognize that forestry has a particular issue in that foresters don't often own the land that they're working. So how do they prove a loss? How do they, and when we started that discussion in this coalition, we did not get any farther than that. But I know in the bill that's just dropped, sponsored by Representative Burke, Representative Lipsky up in House Ag is already aware that she put in forestry as part of the component, but it's not in the Senate bill. So we are going to be hoping that that can be worked out, because we really would like to include our forestry friends in any funding that would be available. And the only other issue that I have with this, and this kind of got by me as we were discussing it during the coalition, is the makeup of the review board. So currently, it's the Secretary of Ag, the State Chief Recovery Officer, and representatives of 3 organizations or entities with experience granting relief funds or technical assistance to farmers appointed by the Secretary. That leaves out Farm Bureau, leaves out Rural Vermont, leaves out anybody that is part of the farming organizations that does not grant anything. Personally, I've been doing grant reviews for the Agency of Agriculture for probably 10 years on a lot of stuff that comes through the Dairy Innovation Center. I mean, I don't give the money, but I know how to review grants. So there are a lot of people out there who could be helpful in this on the review board, but are excluded because of the way this is written. And I talked with Maddie yesterday, and she said that was not the intent. And that's fine, but there's always these little glitches that you run into, as I'm sure you're all aware. So as you're working through, I think it's the same language in both bills, the one in the House too. And as you're looking at that, it may be, you may come up with language, if you're uncomfortable with this also, that would allow more than just granting organizations to have a say in this. Because my other concern was, obviously, NOPA would be one of the first ones that you would think of, because they do grants, but also they tend to look at small and medium farms. So that was the connection there, was my concern. And it might be a minor one, but it's as part of Farm Bureau, we're trying to be all inclusive, and we want to make sure that there are voices at the table to review those grants that would be able to say, oh, you're a large farm, but you do have losses and this is important. And so we just want to have a little equity as far as the review board. So those are the three concerns that I have as the representative of Farm Bureau. I know you're going to hear from some of my folks tomorrow too. Well, I have no idea what they're going to say because we don't prompt them when they come in. We just like them to come in here. But looking over the bill and as part of the original coalition that helped to write the language, very happy with the discussion. Understanding the ask is pretty hefty. And so, but we do support the concept, except for those three little things that I just wanted to bring to your attention. And that's it for me. You have any questions?
Just a comment, maybe. So as I recall, there was a formula in the bill that came out to somewhere around $20 million as the ask.
Mhm.
And I think I made the comment that it never seems to be a good year to ask for any money. I mean, I've been hearing that for 11 years, so I don't know when that good year's coming, but it probably won't be that number. It'll be something maybe substantially south of that, but I think it's important that we do something.
Mhm.
I don't think there's any doubt, and I don't know what the sweet spot is, whether it's 5 million or something similar, but I think it's important. I think this committee has a responsibility to our farmers, a small, medium, or large, forestry included, the crop farmers and dairy farmers and everybody else. That 5 million won't go very far probably if we have similar weather again, but it's our intent, I think, to at least let farmers know we got their back.
I thank you very much for that. When we first started talking about the amount, 20 million took my breath away too. I mean, that's just a lot of money. As someone who just, comes in and listens to the asks. And so anything, I think what we're looking for more is the idea that you've got our backs and any amount of money would be a great start. We recognize certainly that this is the year that all the ARPA money goes away. The federal government is looking pretty dicey right now. And so, and the education fund is, it's, as you mentioned earlier, in the current use, that's taking all the breath out of the system, as it were. And we totally understand that. But I think it was more the fact that, this was a first attempt to say, hey, the ag community is just as important as anything else in here. And we certainly do respect the fact that that and you recognize that. I think coming on the heels of the fact that the House Ag Committee lost 3 members, that was quite a shock for all of us, and it just kind of set the tone a little bit about it. So having support for a bill like this would be instrumental for our world.
Well, expanding on Senator Carl Moore's about the money part of it, and again, kind of what you brought up, but I think the expediency of getting the money out the door, a lot like the program. I really think the presenter of the bill really liked when I had mentioned the program through the VGAF. VGAF program, but I can see it set up in that way where the money goes out quickly and then you can kind of true up at the end of it to where somebody, whether they were deserving of it or not. But I don't think that there's much of that argument going on the way that they administer that program. I think it went very well. So what we had heard with a lot of the farmers that did have the coverages of crop insurance or whatever, it's just the length of time. Just the length of time where it took. They're happy it's coming, and a lot of them, as the potato farmer had said, they can make it happen, and they have all other alternatives, and they know what's coming. But there's a lot of people that don't have that. So,
and I think the thing that we really focused on when we were talking about this is the turnaround time on the money. I know that Maddie spent a lot of time over at the Agency of Agriculture saying it can't be 6 months. It's got to be quickly enough so that if you got to replace seed or pay for your labor, it's got to be pretty quick, and that just doesn't happen a lot of times in government. So that was the expediency of it was what we were looking for more than anything.
Well, I have spoken to the chair of Senate Appropriations, and I've told her that I really fully expected that that our committee was going to pass this bill. I think that we have enough support that we can get that out the door, and as he says, what they do most times with bills like that is they do strip the money out and then kind of see what is at the end of the day where it's at. But I'm betting that we're gonna be able to put something together.
Well, if you need us to go in and speak
Yep.
to Senator Birchall, we'll do that.
I have one question. It's a lawyer question.
Oh,
So when you mentioned the makeup of the board,
yes.
it reads like it says it's groups, the two different groups with experience granting relief funds or experience granting technical assistance. The groups you mentioned, don't they fall out of that, right? Or do they grant technical assistance?
NOFA does both, as
Okay,
far as I know. We do neither.
okay. Yeah,
Farm Bureau
yeah.
does neither. And there are other groups that could be interested in sitting on, such as the watershed groups might be interested
Yeah,
in sitting on
okay.
that. Some of them do grant, some of them don't, some of them offer technical assistance. And it's not that I want Farm Bureau mentioned specifically, that's not what I'm after. I just
Yeah.
want a little more equity in how that's decided.
Do you have language that could suggest that's broader that could?
I don't right now, but I could think about it. Thank you.
That would be helpful.
Okay.
That's a good suggestion, so yeah, that helps.
Might have to connect with a lawyer to do.
Well, I mean, it's like, do you have it or do we contact?
Oh,
Yeah, we have-
We'll contact.
I'll work on it.
Well, good. Anything else?
I don't think so. I think you've had your fill of me.
Yeah. Okay, absolutely. It was a good day yesterday and,
Oh, my folks had a great day.
But there's
Thank
no
you.
maple syrup today.
you
I've got 3 of those.
Well, then you're overdue. Yes, the Canadians were handing them out too, I think, weren't they?
Yeah, it's a chocolate. Yeah,
Oh, and-
Yeah.
I had to shove mine off to a chocolate hound that I know intimately, so.
Well, we thank you very much for your
Thank you,
time
Jackie.
today
Thank
and
you
today.
for all that you do, your advocacy for who you represent. You do a great job and, I think that, with your help with that, a little language would go a long ways with us and to make sure that we get it right so that we don't have to, come back and talk about that again.
Sure.
It'd be great. So other than that, thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a
Thanks,
great
Jackie.
weekend.
Sure. Committee, Linda, what else do we have?
That's it for today.
We have a
We have
visitor over
10:30.
here. Anything that you?
Oh, no, just listening in.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks,
Okay.
Beth.
Then I think